Der König von Bhutan hat eine Vision. In Gelephu im Süden des Himalaya Staates entsteht die erste Mindfulness City der Welt. Gebaut wird nach einem Masterplan der dänischen Architekturfirma Bjarke Ingels Group. Giulia Frittoli leitet das Grossprojekt. Sie ist Senior Urbanist und Landscape Architect und seit 2021 Partner bei BIG. Von Giulia erfahren wir, wie diese Achtsamkeit-Stadt aussieht und wie sie entsteht und wie es überhaupt zu der Zusammenarbeit mit Bhutans 5. Drachenkönig Jigme Namgyel Wangchuk gekommen ist. Mein Name ist Birgit, ich bin Kapitän der Folge 90 von KAP Podcast. Habt ihr Interesse, uns zu unterstützen und ein Patron zu werden? Details dazu findet ihr in den Shownotes.
Welcome to KAP Podcast, Giulia Frittoli.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. It's very exciting to be here and to be able to talk about the Gelephu Mindfulness City.
The Mindfulness City in Bhutan. What was your first experience when you first traveled to Bhutan for this amazing project?
It's just an amazing experience. Just by the time you fly closer to the Himalayas and you just make your way down to Paro, you have this beautiful overview of mountains, forests, nature. You see these paddy fields, you see the small villages, because the cities are not big enough to feel like we would imagine our cities in the most developed countries. It's more like a village scale. And that felt like a place where the environment, the people, everything felt really in harmony with one another. And I think that's where you start understanding what actually mindfulness means. By the time you land, you arrive in this airport, it's very small, and then you're welcomed by the nicest people on planet Earth, that they walk you through the terminal. You have nature and plants inside the small airport with paintings. Everything is decorated, everything is colorful, everything is handmade. And it's almost like going in the past and going in the future at the same time. That's kind of how you want the future almost to look like and be, but it reminds you about what the cities probably were a while ago, what the environment, the way of living was before we overly urbanized.
Absolutely. So living and working next to each other.
Exactly.
For example,
and
craftsmanship.
Exactly, the craftsmanship. You almost have history is alive. Like, I'm Italian, and I think if I would arrive to Italy, I don't know, like you're never welcomed by traditional dances or musics, or I don't know what traditional Italian clothing would look like anymore. But when you arrive to Bhutan, all these traditions, the local culture, the craftsmanship, the art, the color, everything is alive, everything is breathing. It's not that it's preserved. You can feel that it's part of the everyday, and it will be part of that future. And I think that's where the majority of inspiration for thinking about the future of this country came from, is understanding what it is today, what they've built over these 400 years, and how you carry that into the future.
So one person must have had this idea. We create now the first mindfulness city. Who was this person?
It's the actually King of Bhutan, His Majesty, and it's also been incredible to work for a person that is such a good leader, that has so much trust from its citizen, but also that has the long-term vision. And I think for us as architects was very refreshing, because usually you end up working or making plans that need to work within the 4 or 5 years. Plans which is usually aligns with the elections and the government, right? But here we had the opportunity to look at it from the long-term point of view of what we want or what His Majesty was hoping his country will be in the future. And it was very touching when he explained that there's so many people that are living Bhutan today. And that's the core of why.
So many people?
Yeah, so many young talent are just leaving Bhutan because there is not enough job opportunities. And they're mostly educated because they study either in Bhutan or abroad. But it's very hard to have the necessary jobs to keep them employed within their country.
And this was his concern then?
That's his concern. And they experienced that with COVID, right? In 2020, their majority of their economic income comes from tourism. And they experienced that in 2020, no tourists could come in. And you could see that you can imagine that the future of Bhutan might be over if another pandemic hits. And that's something that His Majesty has told us multiple times.
This was the wake-up call.
This was the wake-up call. It's crazy actually how COVID somehow has also the good sides, right? And he felt like, I need to provide a future path for his generations, for future generations, so they don't leave the country, but they remain. So while they all go towards the rest of the world, he thought, is there a way we can bring the rest of the world in and make them stay and maybe bring back some of the ones who have left? And that's how he thought about a new type of city that continues all the traditions and all the principles Bhutan have built for 400 years, but also opens them up to the future. And I think that for us was really important, and we understood at the beginning that what we were doing was not just designing a city, but influencing the future of an entire nation. So it makes you look at the project and your commitment from a very different perspective.
So
how did His Majesty,
get in touch with you?
He has been interviewing and connecting with a series of different architects all around the world.
Well-known
architects. But then he managed to, I think he was during King Charles' coronation in London. He came to Denmark to attend a few events. And in one of these events, he had the opportunity to meet Bjarke Ingels. And at the moment they connected, and he invited him to Bhutan to see the site. And just a few weeks after, we followed and we gave our impression on the site. And from that moment on, he decided that apparently we were the right match, and we took on a few weeks of exercise to come up with the initial vision. And then from the moment on, now it's a year and a half that we are busy with it. Yeah.
Okay. So how big is the site then? He just determined then, said, okay, this is the site where we built our new city. The name of the city, does it already exist?
Yes, it's a very, very tiny town called Gelephu.
Gelephu.
And
Gelephu itself is already existing.
Yeah, it's a very small village. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the south border, close to India. But the way he selected that area is also very strategic. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, in terms of climate, Bhutan is amazing. It's as small as Denmark, but it has all the climate types that you can imagine in the world in one country, because the elevation changes from 7,000 meters above sea level all the way to 100. So in the north of the country is extremely mountainous, and it's very much on an alpine climate. And then the more you move towards south, the more it becomes tropical. So the area we are working within in Gelephu has a subtropical climate. So it's very similar to Singapore, to give you an example.
Okay.
So it's a sort of climate where it's not too cold, it's not too warm, it's easy for everybody to climatize. But what it also has is the flattest area in Bhutan, because Bhutan is so mountainous that it's actually been one of their obstacles in developing the country. It's kind of, he has favored them for many years because he avoided colonization to happen, but at the same time he also restrained their development. But around Gelephu you have this 85 kilometer or relatively flat area. That meant that he could build an international airport, because today when you arrive is actually it's Paro Airport, which is the most dangerous airport in the world.
To land or to
both, land and take off. And it's because when you fly, you're lower than the mountains. So just a little bit of wind makes that landing extremely challenging. So there's actually only a few pilots today that are licensed to be able to land in Paro, and there's only Drukair, which is the national airline that is able to land. Which means that when you think about opening your country to the world, you also need to create that gateway to have an airport that can sustain a growth in annual passenger and in airlines. And the only place where you can actually do it in Bhutan is Gelephu. So this kind of mix of situations and geographical conditions make it an ideal place where to develop the future city.
Mm-hmm. So they themselves did do some studies beforehand. Yeah, they knew exactly where it has to be then. Yeah,
exactly. They gave us the boundary to work within.
Okay. So in 2020 it started off. What was the biggest challenge for the moment? Because the project is ongoing. It is going to be finished when?
It's the first phase will be 2029, end of 2029.
Okay. There's some years to go. So the biggest challenge for the moment, do you have an example so our listeners get an idea?
Yeah, I think the what we look at being his challenge is also what we saw being its opportunity, because it's a site where the abundance of nature is incredible, and I think many people would look at it as designing a city from scratch or a greenfield, but actually I don't think you can ever design something from scratch, because there's nature. Just the fact that you're on a planet, there's nothing from scratch, right? And we really thought, how can we develop a city at the scale that it needs to be to attract the businesses and the kind of economic generation and growth that His Majesty is planning, but it also respects the environment. Then what we looked at is that instead of actually drawing where the city will be, let's draw where the city will not be.
Interesting.
So that was, we transformed that challenge into actually an opportunity. So even though today, if you look at a map, is 2,500 square kilometer of city, we are only building on 70 square kilometer, because we subtracted all the areas that we thought was important to preserve. So I think that was a challenge that we transformed into an opportunity, and we transformed also what we hope will be an example for cities of the future, right? To build upon that harmony between nature and culture that we saw when we landed there, and carry that throughout the future. And of course, like when you start, you have to start from somewhere, but you don't have a crystal ball, so you have no idea what it will happen. So that is a very big challenge. And I think that's why we then started with a large vision, but we broke it down step by step, phase by phase. So then we have implementable milestones and pilot projects to work towards. But overall, of course, all fitting in the next 100-year plan of His Majesty.
Okay. So talking about nature, you are a landscape architect. How do you see architects and landscape architects work together nowadays, and how was it in previous times?
Yeah, I think actually, I don't know if in 10 years from now there will still be a difference between being an architect or a landscape architect, because I think over the past 20 years we've been, or even 50 years, we've been really focused on urbanization and urban development, and a lot of time we superimposed urban system towards natural system, and the two don't really talk to each other. And I think the fact that you see most of cities today, and the most recent cities are built on grids, that shows you like nature. How many grids have you seen in nature? You've seen waterway taking 90 degrees turn. It's not really how nature works. And I think what I find very inspiring of working at BIG actually is that you have the opportunity to co-create together from the beginning. It's not architect starts or landscape architect starts. We all look at the various disciplines. We all look at the needs from a development point of view, but we also look at what we hear, what we see from the landscape, from the climate, and how we work with it rather than against it. I think it's a very important profession.
Very important. And nature is more powerful.
Exactly.
You know? And sometimes we don't consider it like this.
Exactly. And we need to give it space. I think we always try to take away space and time. And we always try to take away space from nature, but just give it its own space. And I think over time, it will be an advantage. But you also need, I think, to be able to work with clients that accept that sometimes some areas, rather than developing them, it's better to leave them and give them to nature. You could see as a loss, right, of developable area. But I think over time, when you think about all the climate hazards and all the resiliency system that we need to build to make sure that our city live longer, you will understand that building less sometimes is a benefit.
Absolutely, yeah. You lived in New York City also, no? You worked there. Yeah. Imagine New York City without the green area in the middle of the town.
Exactly, and access to the green areas is very important. And I think that's also something that we tried with Bhutan and the notion of mindfulness. What does actually mindfulness mean?
What does it mean?
Exactly. And we've done, that was the first question when we were tasked, and we asked His Majesty as well, and sort of everybody has his own interpretation. So we decided to meet with a few monks, and it was an amazing experience.
You met monks?
Yeah, we met a few monks, And they explain us in a very simple way that imagine you're drinking a glass of water, but if you don't look at your glass and you don't focus about you drinking, because I'm talking to you, for instance, there might be a fly in my glass and I will end up having a fly in my mouth. But if you actually focus on your glass and on the fact that you're drinking water, you will realize that you have a fly in your glass. And that was a very simple way to show that it's about being aware of that specific moment, but also aware of what you do. And I think that allows us to think about your role as a human being on this planet and how this planet is moving towards. Because you don't need to be, you are aware of things you do at that time, but you're also aware of what you cause to others and what you cause to the environment. And I think that what was amazing of Bhutan, because Bhutan is all built on a system that is called gross national happiness, that you might have heard before. And when you look at these 9 indicators, but when you looked at it, it's really about 3 ways of creating relationship with yourself, with nature, and with others. And I think this, for me, represents exactly mindfulness. You need to be mindful and aware of what you're doing, where are you coming from and where you're going, but you also need to be aware of whatever pertains to yourself, how that does affect the environment that is around you, from the nature, from the space, everything. And the other ones, the people that you end up creating relationship with, either directly or indirectly. And I think there was a beautiful way for us to understand what the city should have been about. It is really this respect and harmony between your individual, between your relationship with the collective and the environment. And I think that is a great way to look at it, I think.
This is amazing. Do you think, Giulia, that it can be an example for other parts in the world?
I think so, and I hope so. I think the world is already moving towards accepting nature and also thinking about how do we strengthen our communities. I think all cities are going through it. Of course, it's a little more challenging when you have to retrofit, but I think by testing these things in this kind of city, such as the Mindfulness City, you can take the learning and then think about how you apply. So there is that kind of cycle of learning that I think could be very relevant. And I think, of course, there is, I think, a lot of learnings, not only in the built environment, but how people will cooperate together. And this is something that we can't prescribe. Like we're designing a city that it allows the right level of collaboration, the right level of communal spaces and interaction between people and nature. And I'm actually very looking forward for the first phases of the city, see when people move there, what is the mindfulness lifestyle? And then we take the learnings and we bring it somewhere else. But at the same time, also what I find very amazing is that Bhutan is also learning from other countries, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because for many times they've been closed and they learned that there is great things about it, but there's also the downside, that is a sort of aging country, right? And what you learn from other countries, and I think many other countries, many other cities have been adapting them over time, have been growing, they're growing their economy, they adapted to also societal changes. And I think that's that relation. We always say for Bhutan and for the world, there is this relationship between a very tiny country and the impact that it could have on the world, that I think it's a great opportunity. We will need to see it,
yes,
but I think it's an amazing opportunity.
Do people have to apply then for it? I would like to live in this mindfulness city in Bhutan.
Yeah, I don't know actually if there is an application form where you can submit your request to, but definitely I think there will be businesses moving there. There will be new residents, so it will be a city that is open for anybody who would like to move there, but also as well with the Bhutanese local residents. So it will be a city that will be very mixed between the multicultural. Yeah.
So they are looking for international people living there.
It's very important, right? Because you need to imagine that right now, if you think about where the world is going, we really need to think about technology and businesses that also looked at green energy, ways to improve our city and also change the way we live and the way we work. And there's more and more new businesses coming up. You can think about agrotech, also all the advanced technology that we want to integrate, digital asset, There's also aviation logistics. There's so many items, but also spiritual tourism. So we have 7 economic clusters, and we imagine leaders, workers, and businesses from different clusters to move to the city and work there and live there and create, also offer an opportunity for local Bhutanese to work in this kind of environment without leaving their country, which I think it's really important that we have that mix, and I hope it will also be an example of multicultural living and exchange for that other cities can learn from.
Can you give a description of how this city looks like? We talked about nature, but the houses, the buildings. I was reading about these bridges, zongs. Do I spell it right?
Yeah,
zongs. You integrate traditional parts of architecture and building in your new architecture?
Yes, correct. We are thinking of, first of all, you need to imagine a very human scale environment. I think if we look outside our window, it's exactly similar.
We are at the headquarter building now. It's very humid, and we are in the month of November. So
exactly. If we take out the rain and the cloudy sky, but it's kind of 3-4, maximum 6 floors of buildings, so it's very human scale. You will imagine also the streets to be relatively narrow. It's exactly like the Copenhagen city center, so that you feel that human interaction and a kind of liveliness in the streets. And the buildings have been proposed not only to be relatively small scale because of the human scale experience that we wanted to provide, but also because the lower the building, the more sustainable materials you can or locally sourced materials you can use. So we've been looking at river stone, bamboo, and timber as a main source of material for the architecture, which will result into lowering the need for concrete and steel, and therefore reducing the carbon footprint of the building. And because you use local materials, you have the opportunity to create a city of the future that somehow it's similar to what the city of the past looked like. It's similar to the vernacular architecture of Bhutan. But what we found also special is that Bhutan built the vernacular typology based on the mountain landscape. And here we are in the tropics. So it became the opportunity also to rethink their vernacular in a new form of contemporary architecture solution that responds to natural ventilations, to sort of overhang that can protect from rain, but also from sun. So it's sort of buildings that also not only responds to the way people will experience the city, not only to the carbon footprint of the building, but also to the climate itself. And because we work with these local materials, for us it was very important to reinterpret the crafts and the kind of local motifs that you can find in Bhutan. So you can imagine all these buildings to have wood carving or paintings or ornaments, exactly. And of course, I think the challenge is, when you look at it at scale, to build a city that is fully carved, it's a lot of work. But that's where it's possible, I think, when you combine the local craftsmanship with also advanced technology. So I hope that Bhutan and the Mindfulness City will become an example of a city where technology is not replacing the human creativity and the craftsmanship and the handmade, but the two can go hand in hand, or hand in nozzle, if we want to say it that way. So it becomes really an opportunity to collaborate with something that is very handmade and artisanal with something that is very high tech. So that's how we've been looking at the city itself.
You don't feel any pressure, that it has to be finished in 29, the first phase. Is there some space for you also to negotiate? You need a little bit more time now. Do they understand the needs also for architects and planners and landscape architects? Sometimes you need a bit more of time for thinking.
For sure. But I think what is incredible to work for His Majesty and his team, he has actually a very large team of local experts which we work with very closely. We came up together at the different milestones, and we came up together what would actually phase 1 be. What is this scale? So everything that we are deciding in the step by step is co-created together, and we think it fits his ambition and where also the growth of his country needs to be. But I also think it's very much grounded into what are the available resources, what is the available funding, what is the availability and the need for the different projects. So even though we are looking at the first step, I think it's very implementable what we planned for. And when you look at the overall city, we are talking 100 years from now. But it's important that we have 5 years plans, so we take it step by step. So now we are a little bit more detailed in the next 20 years, because it's tangible, you can feel it, and you can plan for that, and then we'll see what happens later on. And but it was really great to work with he's very open-minded, and I think he really trusts his local team, the international teams, and is a great collaboration that has set the various milestones which
and
we're
obviously
working
a great
towards.
Communicator. And he's taking care of his people.
Yes.
Give an example. You have a meeting with His Majesty and his team. Where is it? Where does it take place? What is the atmosphere? It must be very special, no?
It's very special, but it's
What
also...
do you wear?
He is also very chill, if I can say like that. He's extremely like a very humble person. He always makes sure everybody feels very comfortable. It's not overly formal. There's no particular dress code. You can show up with your sneakers. It's completely fine. And it takes enough time. Every time we meet, we are either or in Gelephu or in Thimphu or in Paro, most of the times in Bhutan.
Mm-hmm.
And he let us take all the time we need. Sometimes we had meetings for 4 hours going through 600 slides. And he really follows through every single slide. He listens, he's a great listener. And what I find very inspiring, that every meeting he reminds us what is our mission. So at times, even if you might judge and look at a closer plan of how the buildings are oriented or which rivers you widen and which not, you always end the meeting zooming out, and he always reminded us what we are doing for, that this is for Bhutan's future, to allow the country to survive for the next 100 years. And that is very important also for ourselves and our team, to always think about the long-term vision and the impact that we will have. So we have, and he always tells us we have to do it right. Like, we cannot go wrong, which adds to the pressure, but I think it's also with pressure.
Fair enough,
Exactly. But yeah, it is really a wonderful client, projects, and a country. Like, we just love working.
This is a dream, every
dream.
architect or planner dreams of, having a partner who is really also thinking for the project and asking the right questions also.
Yeah, for sure.
And listening, it's so important. Yes.
It is.
Next time you're going there?
I'm going there in 4 weeks for National Day, which is the 17th of December. And so it will be nice. We'll be very sunny in Thimphu, and will be a great time.
So you stayed there also for your vacation?
I've been staying there for my summer vacation, yes. I got looped into the beautiful Bhutan experience, and we spent a few days there, yes. Mm-hmm. It's really a beautiful place, really. It's magical, I think.
About the magic, yes, it's magical. I would like to ask you also,
There is something like, when you go there, you feel the positive energy of people. There is this kindness that is, and I don't think it's forced. It's not about hospitality. They are genuinely nice people. You feel a place that is very authentic. And I think, the places I traveled, sometimes it's harder and harder nowadays to experience a place that feels very authentic. And that's what Bhutan is. It feels like just the place it is. When you go there, you are immersed in nature, every corner, everywhere you look at. We were driving towards the airport, and we're just a monkey just crossing the street and hanging out on the side of the road. And it's just amazing. Like, you just have animals, wildlife, you just feel it in every single corner. Everything is kind of carved. You can feel also how curated it is in terms of arts and crafts. And now, like in nowadays cities, you feel like to see that you need to go to a museum. But Bhutan, that's how you perceive it. And you're always welcomed with this white silk scarf that they wrap around your neck, and is an example of welcoming and sort of wishing you good luck for the days and wellness and well-being for the days you'll be there. Mm-hmm. And it's just so simple. Everything is simple. And I think sometimes our daily life feels so overly complicated.
Yes.
Right? Everything is also very much prescribed. But there is a layer of informality, of genuine connection between the people and the nature. It's very hard to describe, when you feel there, I think all of us, I think we brought all the team by now.
Really?
Yeah, because we always alternate. So I think we have 25 people, and most of them have been there. And they all said the same.
So you talk about your team for this project?
Yeah,
25,
our team.
25,
yeah,
okay.
25.
Everybody was there. Yeah, I think it's very important.
We all alternate. It's
okay.
important because you have to experience it. And I can tell you this, but when you go, and I really hope you had any chance to go there, it just is a beautiful place.
Yeah, I look in your face and you talk about it.
It's really nice.
Mm-hmm. So their earning is from Bhutan is the tourism, but it's not an overloaded tourism, and it feels natural, as you say. You know, you are welcomed with this nice piece of tissue, the silk scarf, and so on. This is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so very authentic.
Yeah, and then they have this sustainable development fee. So you have a fee per day, and they've done it for tourists, and they've done it in a way so they can control and think about more sustainable tourism, but also make sure that tourism gives funds to provide jobs and investment for public facilities and infrastructure. So you're always actually accompanied by tour guides who take a lot of time to tell you all the stories. What is very nice about Buddhism is the stories, I think. When you go visit a temple, you see a lot of paintings, but all of them, it's actually a narrative, it's a storyline that tells you an experience or the lifetime of the Buddha, and how maybe sort of related to the community he had around and what is its influence in the world, in the place. And the guides take so much time to explain you everything. And there is that moment where you feel very connected with the place. You actually learn it. And it's very, very special. It's very special. And then you can go hike, and then you just see all these amazing plants and animals, and they tell you all the stories. So it's really a place that you feel part of it when you're there and when you leave.
So integrating the nature in this city, how will this happen?
Yeah, that's why actually, to your point,
yes,
we have all the bridges.
Yes.
Because so the Himalayas have the glaciers and the snow caps, and they sort of melt, and they melt into thousands of rivers. They just follow down to the floodplains of towards then India. And our site in Gelephu, we have 35 large rivers, but thousands of streams that just run through the site. And that's one of the first things we noticed when we were there. We went up on an outlook, and you can see so many rivers. Almost like if you look at our city, you see a lot of roads. Imagine all these roads being water. That's kind of how it feels, the site today. So the first thing that we thought, not only we don't touch any of the forest that is there, but we also decided to preserve all the rivers and widen the riverbed. Rather than building walls and making all the river narrower to get more developable land, we did the opposite. We left space for the river. What that does become is that every neighborhood, every 300 to 500 meters, you encounter a stream. So then you end up having a series of bridges because you need to connect the various neighborhoods. But what it becomes special is that bridge allows people to connect, but also nature to connect below. And we also analyze all the movement of the elephants and the wildlife thanks to the local team and an ecology specialist that we had on board. And we could size also all the clearances under the bridges to ensure that elephants and wildlife could go through. So these bridges become really that moment of connection. So that's why we thought the bridge should not be seen as a way to move from A to B, but a way where actually people come together and nature comes together.
It's
so
the
we
habitat.
decided it's the habitat, exactly, the habitat. And we decided to locate most of the communal functions, whether you think about a school, a library, university, a multicultural center, within the bridges themselves. So they become places where even when you go through, you connect with the culture, you connect with the people. And that is the reference to the zongs that you mentioned before, that are actually their fortresses that are there today, and most of them are closest to rivers. So eventually we ended up, it's again a circle, right, where you try to design something looking at the future to respect waterways and nature, but what you end up having is also an architectural typology that feels so much close to the vernacular typology of the fortress that Bhutan has built 400 years ago. And I think that's what's interesting. When you really learn from the place, then you will realize that your future is not that far from what history looked like, but it might perform differently.
I think we can also say that this is the strength of big, to think beyond and to create an extra space, like the Copenhagen, for example. You have the roof, but not only the roof. You use it for skiing, for example, or there are several other examples.
Yeah, and I think that's also where we looked at it from a perspective of what do you want the future to be? Yes. What is the place you would like to live in the future? I think that's always what we think. And that's actually the Danish word for design is formgiving, which means form giving. And we always think about it. It's very interesting because as architects, you end up giving form to something that doesn't yet exist. So you are giving a form to the future. And by doing so, you have the power to influence what the future will look like. So it's important that we think about what do we want our future to look like. So maybe you don't want industries to just be the gray spot of our city, but perhaps could be the mountain that Copenhagen doesn't have. And if we think about the Mindfulness City, maybe we also want a city that allows the elephants to go through, that doesn't require forests to be taken down, and so on. So I think looking at things with that lens always adds a value to the project. And of course, like we are, at the same time, we call ourselves pragmatic utopians. So of course we know we have to respond to the brief, we have to respond to economic and functional constraints, also legislative constraints, but it's also adding that part of a gift. What else can you do? What else can you gift the world with that makes it a better place? I think that's where we start, and that's where a lot of time you end up with a result that you might have not imagined it before. It kind of results into a new typology, a new type of cities. But I think we've demonstrated with a few of our projects that it does make a positive impact, both for people and for the environment. Right. So that's what we strive for.
Everybody should think about the future, so concerns everybody, the architecture. Once you step out of your house or apartment, you're in the middle of architecture. Yeah,
exactly. I think outside your door.
Yes.
And that's what I think we were discussing before, that somehow every road you walk on, or every street you drive, or every building you enter has been designed by somebody. So your behavior is to some extent predefined or scripted. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting if we need to script the behavior of how we live our world, what the script needs to be, how do we want to live in. So I think it's important that not only architects, but actually everybody should think about what do you want your future to be, what do you want to see outside of your building, what type of street you want to walk in, what type of park you want to spend time on. And I think that is very important to also then add that layer of community engagement and thinking a bit more broadly, not just as architects, but as just citizens of
Absolutely, and consider your city really as your city. Exactly. You're part of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think a very interesting aspect.
On your homepage, www.big.dk,
yes.
Right? Our listeners could then follow the project of Bhutan. Giulia, thank you so much for this interesting conversation with you. We have also a website. Our website is capture.ch. Do you have an Instagram?
Yes, I do. So you can find me under my name, Giulia Frittoli, and also follow Big Bills, but also GMC. There is Gelephu Mindfulness City Instagram page too, that I would love for everybody to follow, and let's see what the future will bring.
So if there are any questions, please send us or me an email, and to get an answer for you, you are very well connect. And then, thank you so much, Giulia.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be able to talk about this wonderful project.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.